I want you to wear your detective hats today and kind of like talked about layoffs in tech. There are so many layoffs in tech, and is it even like possible for you to identify if your company is prepping for the next massive layoff? Like, are they just being so sneaky, or is there any signs that can help you to kind of like figure out if your company is prepping for the next layoffs? And in today's video, I wanted to share 9 signs that might be possible that your company might be secretly trying to lay off people. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Vicky May and I am a software developer in New York City. And in the past couple of years, I've been sharing and continue sharing things that I've learned in tech. And as you might know, that I have a career in tech, and I would also love to share all these things that I learned along the way. So if you're interested in this kind of content, maybe consider subscribing. So in today's video, let's talk about the L words. Yes, layoffs. I try to not mention that word because it's getting just so sensitive nowadays. Like, there's so many layoffs in tech, and let's just talk about all these different signs that I've noticed in the past and talking to people who got layoffs, and when they are looking back, they were like, you know what, these are all the signs that I should have picked up on, and I hope that this video will help you too. Let's get started with this. Sign number 1, and it's also probably the most obvious sign, is the financial performance are going downwards. What I mean by that is it's probably in one of those, town halls or all hands or just quarterly reports that the company's financial performance isn't doing well, and it hasn't been doing well for a while. There should have some sort of ways for you to find out about company in general, like if they're doing well. And especially if you are working for a public company, it's pretty obvious, or it's pretty interesting that if you heard a lot of, interesting news about CEO changes or like massive of different changes in the company, or really bad news or scandals that are causing the stock market to go down for these companies. And a lot of times when that happens, is a really pretty clear sign that the financial performance is also not doing well because of those breaking news that are happening in the company. So for smaller companies, it's harder to really tell. So I would say definitely be aware of the financial performances for the company, because that helps a lot. Sign number 2 is beware of and listens to the company's restructuring and downsizing talks. What I mean by that is be aware of all these like conversations that comes out from, your manager or the company that is just going through a lot of restructuring and reorg situations. I know sometimes it happens a lot, especially in small startups, because when a small startup is trying to grow larger or turning into a more mid-sized company, they obviously need to reorganizing their structures and reorganizing their teams. So that makes sense when the reorg situation is happening. However, I want you to be like a little bit like aware of if there's any interesting reorg happening that is related to, either cutting off the team or cutting off certain features, or just like basically similar to downsizing. And if that is happening, and also, the company's financial performances isn't doing well, you gotta be careful. Sign number 3 is like sudden changes or cancellations of projects. This is something that probably a little bit more of a spin-off of a reorg situation. When companies are trying to figure it out, their teams and their feature teams and all these like operational restructuring changes, a lot of times they will be reconsidering the projects, and especially like for research and development type of projects, they might be thinking of either cutting them off or cutting off some of the staffings on those teams. And I know sometimes it's not really, that could be definitely the case that they're doing layoff or about to be doing massive layoff, but it is a good sign if your company is restructuring and they're trying to figure things out, and a majority of the feature projects are not really getting pushed or being canceled. A lot of times that is a sign for you to really rethink about your strategies, because a lot of times if the company isn't doing well, especially financially, they wanted to cut back on those research and developments, and they wanted to focus more on revenues. They wanted to have cut off the expenses and wanted to increase the profit margin. So therefore they're looking to focus mainly on their core features, which means that could be possibly bringing them more revenues, and therefore they wanted to cut off some of the maybe and researches and all these interesting projects that are not in the short term bringing them values and revenues. Sign number 4 is hiring freeze. So hiring freeze is something that it's a indication that the company is looking back into their budget and trying to cut down their budget. When you have a massive hiring, that means the company is expanding. A lot of times when it comes to small startups, they might just have a lot of funding and therefore they're doing a massive of hiring, right? So a lot of times if you heard that the company is not doing well and they're start looking into budgeting, cutting off expenses, the first thing before they start laying people off would be just freezing their hiring budget. So if the company is not telling you that they're freezing on hiring, you probably might notice there's less openings for junior positions of developers, there's less of internships opportunities, there's less of just hiring in general. And if you are an engineer and you've been doing a lot of interviews, you've been conducting interviews for your company, and you haven't heard people asking you to conduct an interview for a while, that might also be a sign that your company has been considering or secretly considering freezing their hiring budget. Sign number 5 is you've noticed that you have increased workload and overtime. I don't mean by if you're looking or working up to a promotion, you probably worked overtime comparing to your colleagues. Or sometimes you just leading on a project and you're super busy. That's okay. But what I mean by working overtime is that you start noticing that because of the hiring freeze has happened, you started to notice that they're not backfilling engineers anymore. In general, you probably will have 3 developers working on this feature, but now you probably has 2 or even just 1. Maybe it's just you. And you also hear that, the management or the upper management are probably requesting you to be working overtime to push certain features. There is an indication that they are trying to push as much work as possible to you because they're trying to lay people off and they want you to finish what you have already. And that could be a sign. All of these signs are happening. Yeah, it's most likely that your company is prepping for a layoff. But if you hear just one sign, I would say that take a grain of salt and maybe re-evaluating the situation and think through that. If you're just working a lot and you're working overtime, and honestly if you're not happy, you probably should just consider start looking elsewhere anyways. Sign number 6, decline in employees' benefits. This could be a reduction of your health benefits, your 401k, or just cutting less and less of employees' benefits. But that being said, it's really uncommon that the company would start announcing that they're cutting off benefits. That could be a pretty obvious sign, and it will cause a lot of turbulence in the company just in general. So I wouldn't say that usually company would do things like that, but what they can do to reduce employees' benefits, it's by cutting off a lot of like the extra benefits. For instance, like you used to have a lot of like free lunch, or you have fancy caterings at your company, and you start noticing that they're having less and less of those benefits, or even just like a work trip that the company used to pay for everybody to fly in for a conference, just like less and less of those employees' benefits on site in the office, or even just like extra money that usually the company provides. For instance, educational benefits or educational budget. They start cutting that less and less, or like even making it harder to approve. Those are very subtle signs that you can pick up that the company is trying to save costs. Sign number 8 is, okay, so this is like a really sketchy one. It's like the increase of employees' evaluations. If you notice that all of a sudden there's an increase in performance review or evaluations, or like just more frequently your manager has been on meetings with like their managers and like the upper management, it could be a sign that the company is assessing the workforce for potential layoffs. Just think about it for a minute, right? Like if you're prepping for a layoff, you wanted to find out like your top performers so you don't cut them, and you want to kind of like find a way to like really measure that. And in order to measure all of those performances, the easiest way is probably through your manager or through your team lead or whoever that's kind of like have a better understanding of your work performances. That is one of the signs that are pretty devious, but it's also considered an alert that if your manager is going on to a lot of meetings with upper management, the restructuring changes, like the signs that I mentioned above, you might need to look elsewhere just in case. Sign number 9 is that you start noticing that the senior level or executives or like the C-levels are slowly leaving one by one. This is a sign because if you pay attention of the departure of the senior employees and the key executives, layoff might be like part of this larger restructuring plan. And a lot of times when that happens, obviously the C executives are probably kind of noticed the first, because when they make these big changes, they probably inform them ahead of time, or they already see that already coming before it actually, gets to your position. So obviously if you start noticing that people aren't happy, then leaving, especially in the senior levels, you know that the new management is trying to make some changes. They might probably considering cutting off costs, might be laying off people, and therefore there are more senior levels of developers, staff engineers, or even, CTOs are leaving, new CEOs are joining, and things like that. So that is also a really good sign for you to really reconsider your situation and see if you should start looking around as well. Remember, these signs that I mentioned before, it's indicating there might be a possibility of laying off. I have no proof of it whatsoever. These are just like interesting signs that the company might be planning up something, they might be sketchy, but it's not like 100%. I would not say that, but sometimes it's happened, and a lot of times before they start doing a massive layoff, they wanted to make sure that everything is organized, at least for the company's benefit, and before they can communicate to the people at work. And if you notice these signs are happening to you, at least majority of them, I would say like probably having a second scenario or a backup plan wouldn't be the worst case, and start thinking about looking around and maybe prepping for your next journey. Remember, communication is the key. Don't feel hesitate to ask your HR or your supervisors about your company's situation, but I know a lot of times it really depending on the individuals if they're willing to share that much about the companies or how much that they really know, and a lot of times they probably don't even know. So it's very unfortunate that sometimes you just kind of have to like be aware of the company's performance and like how everything is going within the organization to kind of like prep yourself for in case if there's gonna be a layoff. I hope this video helped you to kind of understand the signs to watch out for layoffs, and I hope that you would find this video helpful and give me a thumbs up if it does, and please share this video with someone else that you might think that would be benefit for them as well. And take care and stay positive. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Peace.